ride once, never return. They reached the gates at sundown, 6 young adults with thrift store flashlights, a drone that barely held charge, and the kind of bravado that thrives on dares and internet views. Ohio's sky was a sheet of smoky lilac dimming toward bruise. The sign above the archway, half swallowed by kudzu, still spelled Pleasure Park, though the U had fallen and swung on a single nail, tapping the metal like a lazy metronome. A thin wind sifted along the chain links with a hiss, as if the fence itself were whispering, telling them to go home. Lisa, quiet, careful, the group's lens, lifted her phone for a framing shot. "We roll from the name, then tilt down to the lock," she murmured. Mark, whose grin always promised trouble, rattled the rusty padlock. It snapped cleanly in his fist, corrosion giving way with a sound like dry bones. Somewhere inside, metal answered with a long, tired groan, the park clearing its throat after years of not speaking. "Perfect," John said, pushing the gate with a heel. It yawned. The hinges complained. From far within, a plink, plink, plink rose like a dropped ball bearing skipping off glass, then silence that felt arranged. Emily, who'd read everything about the place and regretted most of it, hovered close. "If we see anyone, squatter security, we bail." "We promised." "We promised views," Mark said. He winked at Lisa's camera, and Lisa caught the wink. It flashed across her screen like a tiny electric fish. They stepped into a field of memories concessions with their shutters rusted down, cotton candy murals, blistering game kiosks, slumped as if ashamed. Sarah, practical and skeptical, kept a mental map. David, all tech and nerves, trailed with a backpack full of spare batteries and an EMF reader he didn't actually understand. A loop of carnival melody unspooled in the distance, familiar, but bent a half-step sour like a music box left on fire, melted out of key. "Did you hear that?" Emily asked. "We all did," John said too quickly. He forced a laugh. The laugh hopped once, twice, and died, as if the air itself didn't want to carry it. They found the midway, and the thing that owned the horizon, a Ferris wheel so tall it seemed to snag the first stars. Its cars hunched like eyelids. Rust had chewed the spokes into lace. A single high metal tick came from above the lightest touch of wind, teasing a car so it nudged and complained. Lisa zoomed. Through the screen, the wheel didn't look still. It looked as if it breathed. They moved, and the park arranged scenes for them, a ring toss with milk bottles beheaded, a prize booth with cloud-stained teddy bears, a clown face painted across a shutter nose flaked to raw plywood cheeks, cracked open into a network of white scars. The clown's painted smile had been scraped and redrawn by vandals into something wider, teethier. In the hush between their footsteps, a faint chuckle traveled the midway light, as dust falling too small to be anything human. Emily stopped. 23, she said, the number a password. It was the Comet right, David nodded. Rear axle sheared in the third car, he said, glancing at a scribbled forum printout he'd folded into his pocket. Chain drive locked. Train didn't stop. Don't, Sarah warned. What I'm being clinical. Don't ruin the video with shop talk, Mark said. We sell vibes. As if on cue somewhere, a calliope yawned awake and coughed out 4 crooked notes, then went quiet like a scolded child. They reached the coaster station. The Comet's arch sagged over the platform, white once, now the color of a smoker's tooth. Weeds sprouted through safety lines. A row of turnstiles stood like arrested dancers who'd forgotten the step mid-spin. A light bulb trembled in its socket over the operator's booth, buzzing with the low, petulant whine of something that should be dead, but wasn't. Lisa's camera panned across the control panel, big toy-looking buttons, a lever like a ship's throttle, a key switch without a key. Someone had written "Don't" in black marker beside "Start." Someone else had crossed out the apostrophe and added "Laugh." From beneath the station, the timbers murmured a settling crackle like a throat clear before a voice tries again after a long, long silence. "Is this where they?" Emily began. "Not here," David said. "On the far curve." A wheel-lifted track joint dipped and he swallowed. Momentum did the rest. The words themselves came out soft, but the air around them made a low hum, as if the park objected to a mundane explanation. They followed the splintering catwalk along the first lift hill. The chain lay slack in its trench, fossilized grease gleaming like tar. A poster near the stairs had survived under a scrap of plexiglass, "Grand Reopening, July 16th. A jester's face leaned in from the margin eyes, bright enough to have once reflected light. Somewhere below, coins clinked one after another, like someone was paying for 5 lives in a machine that only took quarters. Sarah crouched near a maintenance closet. The door was ajar. The dark inside had the wet look of a tongue. "Don't," Emily said. "Just a peek," Sarah said, and froze at the threshold. On the inside of the door, pinned beneath a strip of yellowed tape, was a photograph. Not of the accident, but of what came before it. Teenagers, other teenagers from some other summer, laughing with sunburned noses, a careful hand, writing names on the back: Mark, M. Dave, Sarah, John Liss. The spelling wobble felt like a joke, or a statement. A tiny crackling came from the paper itself, like the dry applause of dead grass. "It's a prank," John said. "Urban explorers leave stuff. It's a genre." "Then who left it here for us?" Emily asked. "No one," Mark said. His voice was the smallest it had been all evening. A crow barked from somewhere high, a single harsh syllable that made the wood around them answer with a hollow knock. They retreated to the midway in a cluster. Lisa checked her footage. The battery icon blinked like a tired heartbeat. David swapped packs. While he did, the park filled their pause with a sound like a faraway parade, drums, 2 slow cymbals that never quite met. "Okay," Mark said, recovering. "We get the money shot, then call it." Ferris wheel hero frame, moon behind it, smooched the camera goodnight. Boom! The nearer they came to the wheel, the more it spoke. A thread of squeals, a small crying of little metal things trying to remember how to move. They stood beneath it, necks aching. "Lisa, go low," Mark said. "Dutch angle up. Make it hungry." Lisa lay back on the warm asphalt and sank the camera into the dew. Through her screen, the wheel's center looked like a pupil. Across the plaza, a busted speaker exhaled one syllable of carnival bark, "Step," then swallowed itself with a soft pop. Sarah drew in a breath. "Let's leave a gift," she said. If there are kids." She set a ring of plastic bracelets on a bench, the kind that snap around your wrist with a sting. "They were teenagers," Emily whispered. "Some of them," Sarah said. "Some weren't." Behind them, a string of bulbs jittered on, clicking one after another like teeth. The light made the clown's face on the shutter leap forward in detail, the cratered paint, the hairline fractures. Lisa stepped nearer, framing the eyes. Very faintly, a recorded laugh floated thin, brittle, as though copied onto cassette 1,000 times, until it wore down to the ghost of itself. "It's triggered," John said. "Motion sensor." "Then why didn't it laugh when we walked in?" Emily asked. No one answered. Even their silence had a weight pressing against the clotted hush, until the hush grew thicker, like cloth soaked through. They turned for the exit at last, the sensible thing. They'd gotten enough fear to flavor their channel for weeks. But the park was a maze that disliked straight lines. Paths that had run true on the way in, tilted and forked signage pointed at blank space, and the gate seemed to retreat each time they tried to name it. The wind braided itself into the garlands of prayer flags someone had left, making them hiss like snakes, drowsy and content. They found a pond where there should have been a picnic lawn. Water black with tannin cattails decapitated the surface, stippled with gnats. A bullfrog called from the reeds, a deep bell note, and then another answered from impossibly far inside the park, like echoes communicating through walls. Add this to B-roll, Mark said, though his voice was an octave lower than usual. Lisa filmed the water, It filmed her back the surface, holding her face steady while hers wobbled. Somewhere beyond the trees, a low rattle rose, the kind a roller coaster chain makes when it wakes, slapping its own spine to life. David looked down at the EMF meter, which didn't know any better than to look busy. "You're kidding me," he said. The rattle gathered itself, sorting into rhythm, teeth, finding teeth, chank, 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 chank. "Power?" Sarah asked. "There's no A transformer," hummed politely far away, as if none heard this. "Don't go," Emily said. But Mark was already walking toward the sound, like gravity had remembered his name. The moon should have been behind clouds. Instead, it brightened and watched. As they followed, the air changed pitch, an inaudible tone, resolving into something that felt like pressure in their teeth. They reached the Comet station again, but it wasn't precisely the same. The turnstiles had straightened, aligning with one another as if attending a roll call. The operator's booth light steadied instead of flickering. From the lift hill, the chains sang a long metallic hymn that lifted the hair along their arms. The cars waited where minutes earlier there had been only track. 6 of them, each with lap bars, raised each with seats the color of old cherries. No one tapped the control panel. 3 quick knocks, and the amplifier, hidden in the bones of the place, carried the sound out like an announcement. Mark glanced back only once. Then he vaulted the gate. The park gave a little cheer, soft a rustle the sound dry leaves make when you step in. Lisa, unwilling to lose him, climbed after. The camera's red light blinked. It counted not seconds, but decisions. Emily swore. David hesitated. Sarah closed her eyes for a heartbeat and opened them harder. John, who always hid fear with jokes, he didn't mean ran out of jokes. As they took their seats, the lap bars dropped with oiled certainty, each click a period at the end of a sentence written long ago. "No power," David said, without conviction. The station speakers awoke with a warm burp of static, then whispered, "Keep hands and feet inside the car at all times." Sarah looked toward the black pond. "We should get off," she said. Mark smiled without teeth. "What's the worst that could happen?" The chain replied with a bright, descending clatter that seemed to grin back. The chain seized them and began to climb, and all 6 leaned back, as if reclining into a mouth. The lift hill spoke in bright, busy teeth, chank, 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 each link catching and handing them upward in a rhythm too eager to be mechanical. Lisa kept the camera over her shoulder, filming not faces, but hands, the white-knuckle ballet of grip and sweat. At 30 feet, the midway revealed its geometry, the prize booths forming a broken smile, the funhouse squinting with boarded eyes, the Ferris wheel like a clock without hands. Wind went through the dead pennants and made them whisper secrets and stripes. Emily counted in her head, cars, supports, points of failure. Her lips moved, but she didn't say it out loud. Somewhere below, a speaker choked a welcome that must have once run on opening day. "Good evening, thrill seekers," the tape so chewed that the vowels thinned and whistled as if they'd been dragged over gravel. John tried to chuckle that he'd thrill-seek my bed, but the hill ate his joke before it could grow. The chain song changed timbre, higher, more excited as the train made the metal seemed to taste its own speed in advance. Sarah pressed her knees together and measured the moon over the Ferris wheel's rim. David lifted the EMF meter, and not knowing what any of it meant, pretended to read an omen. They crested. The front car tipped into weightlessness, a shiver of decision. And the comet paused, as if to take breath. All the tiny sounds tucked inside the park gathered at their ears, at once a soda cup, skittering a short distance, then stopping. A painted sign rubbing its screw like a cricket. A far moth-eaten chuckle from the shuttered clown. Lisa framed Mark's grin at the edge of the silence. It looked the way a struck match looks right before it becomes fire. Then gravity remembered them. The drop thundered into their bodies, a pressure like a held-back shout, finally let loose. The wheels found their line with a shriek so clean, it almost felt sterile, like a blade rinsed glass bright. The train dove and tossed them around a curve that had never been this tight, and also had always been exactly this tight. The rails sang in two keys, one present, one older, as if the run they made now harmonized with a run they had made before, and both versions demanded to be heard. At the far straightaway, the comet should have relaxed, but it didn't. Instead, the track thrummed a tense guitar string pulled to near snap, and the cars jittered as if pixelated by fear. Emily squeezed David's arm until he hissed, and then she hissed too, because she'd made a sound, and the park liked that. They rose into the high horseshoe turn where the original accident had started. The train's chatter dulled into a deep, soggy groan, wood remembering weight it vowed never to carry again. Lisa aimed across the park, panning from the wheel to the black pond and back. Her camera's onboard mic recorded a layer of carnival melodies so faint, you'd think it lived under the ground, bumping along the foundation stones like a heartbeat under a floor. At the apex, all momentum failed. The train hesitated, scissored left, then settled into a standstill so sudden they swore they could feel dust patter their cheeks. In the held breath of that height, the only sound was the click of the camera's image stabilization, searching for a horizon that didn't exist. Mark laughed and called out that he'd break the curse with pure charisma. His voice went forward and hit the front of the car and came back different, thinner, as if strained through wire. Maintenance stop, David said, grateful to have language to throw at a thing that hated language. Somewhere below, a relay snapped and clacked a reply, like a tongue testing a tooth. The chain engaged again, but not in front of them. Behind. They heard it spool backward, a rewind of appetite, the links slapping their own history into place. The comet eased, then jerked, and the nose tilted toward the station as if reconsidering the whole ride. Okay, Sarah said, voice steady because someone's had to be. When we reach the platform, we get out. No hero shots, no B-roll in restricted areas. Except one, Mark said. None, Sarah said. The return run clicked at intervals 1, 2, 3, like a metronome guiding a ghost conductor's hand. They rolled into the station to the minor triumph of lights that lit without power indicator bulbs, winking awake a chorus of green that felt like sarcasm. A recorded patter cheerfully advised exit to your right, but the speaker coughed halfway through and bled into a long, wet fizz. The lap bars held them longer than was polite. A low hydraulic murmur negotiated with itself and then let go in 6 staggered sounds. The gate swung open. The turnstiles squeaked in sequence 3 little chirps and a timid fourth as if embarrassed to be part of this at all. They spilled onto the platform. Lisa squeezed her eyes and allowed herself one shake, the kind that clears snow globes and emotions. The camera kept rolling. On the footage later, they would hear a human breath that nobody took, and a small, delighted titter-skitter along the panel in front of the start button. "I told you," Mark said, swagger reviving like a weed after rain. "It's showtime. We need the I conquered the comet speech right there." He pointed to the narrow catwalk beside the first drop, a strip of wood that hadn't been confident even in its youth. "Absolutely not," Sarah said. "It's 30 seconds, he said. 30 seconds and 1,000,000 views. Or 30 seconds and a broken neck," Emily said. From the control booth, a paper scroll uncurled itself with a papery hiss, tapping the counter twice like a fingertip that had learned to drum. David frowned and stepped near. It wasn't a scroll. It was a maintenance log date stamped in purple ink pen strokes and a foreman's scratched algebra. Emily picked it up. The last entry was July 16th. Clear for public operation, it said a judgment handed down like a misdiagnosis. Below, someone else had added, "Not clear for them." As she spoke the words, the bare bulb above her head buzzed like a trapped bee, and then settled again, as if embarrassed. "Guys," John said. He had gone to the edge of the platform and looked down. "You need to see this?" They peered. At the base of a support beam, a bouquet of glow sticks lay arranged in a messy circle, their spent plastic bodies cloudy, their once colors now, like bruises filmed over. A thin, glassy chime spread from the sticks. When the wind tickled them, the faintest clack of hollow tubes kissing. "Offerings," Sarah said. "Teenagers come here after midnight. They leave things to be seen." She swallowed, or to be seen by. But Mark had already swung himself over the safety chain. He hit the catwalk with a plank thud and flashed the smile he used when he wanted to be forgiven later. 30 seconds, he said again, softer. Mark, Lisa pleaded. The park hushed on purpose, the way a classroom does when the teacher wants every word to count. And in that arranged quiet, his shoes made 3 definite taps that ricocheted up the ribs of the structure, like a warning trying to become a prayer. He reached the post at the lift hill's lip and set his feet in an "I own this" stance. Lisa framed him. Audio rolling, she said, because procedure was how she apologized to fear. Mark lifted his arms. "We came to Pleasure Park too," he began. He never finished because the chain behind him snarled itself awake with a dog's certainty. A rapid metallic bark that made bone remember it was meat. The train, empty where it should have been, began to move not from the station where any sensible physics lived, but from somewhere on the hill, as if a section of the night had decided to become a car. Off the track, Sarah shouted. Her voice pinwheeled around the station, bouncing off glass and tin in frantic echoes that overlapped and tripped each other. Mark turned. What he saw announced itself first, as sound the hard, bright seethe of steel rolling true, the violined whine of bearings asking to be perfect for just one more run. The Comet wasn't a full train now. It was 3 linked cars and a wheel. It came down the first angle, and the catwalk became a thin coin, flipping heads, tails, heads. Emily lunged toward the kill switch in the booth. The panel broke the rules of dead things and glowed. The switch resisted her like a wrist that wouldn't turn. Somewhere within the console, a relay trilled, no giggled light and unhelpful. David dove for the manual brake lever. It answered with a creak that meant it remembered obeying, but not for people like them. Mark calculated wrong, the way 100 other people had calculated wrong at the last second, before a thing became forever. He went for the ladder, not the gap. His foot slipped on a ridge of grease that should have been dust. The hiss of his shoe skidding was unimportant in itself, but the sound of Lisa's breath breaking into a cry was not because the park saved it and gave it back and saved it again. Lisa didn't zoom. She couldn't. The lens captured what it could in the cars, the geometry of Speed Mark's chest turning to face his friends so his eyes could be the last to speak. There was no scream from him, not because he was brave, but because the comet's voice took the space first, a crisp, decisive syllable of metal riving like the snip of tailor's shears through fabric pushed to the correct tension. The impact was clean, in the way the worst things are clean. The cars scissored the catwalk's corner and rode a new angle onto the wood. Mark became motion without destination. The rail took what it wanted and didn't return it. The station filled with a low, stunned chord, as if the beams themselves had a throat, and then absorbed it, ashamed of being heard. The cars continued unburdened through the station and out onto the return where they slowed without brakes and vanished into a turn not built in 1986. Lisa's camera lost focus and found it again with microscopic clicks. In the audio, a smear of carnival tune unspooled just 6 notes that did not agree with one another, and under it, a child's clapping off time sincere wrong. Sarah grabbed Lisa by both shoulders so their bones knew their names. Emily stood with her hands out as if waiting for something to be placed in them. David's EMF meter gossiped. John knelt at the gap where the catwalk used to be and stared at the space the way you stare at a closed mouth trying to read the sentence behind lips. "Is he?" he said, and the word failed because it couldn't figure out which tense to wear. Sarah's eyes gathered water and refused to let it fall. She would cry later in a different chapter, or now, but not here. Lisa Emily said softly, "Look at me." Across the midway, the funhouse door hiccuped on its hinges, a lonely squawk that might have been a laugh having second thoughts. The Ferris wheel didn't move, and because it didn't move, it felt like it almost had. A thread of air slipped along the coaster's spine and played it like a comb, a brittle zippering whisper that suggested applause from a crowd not present. "Down," Sarah said, pointing to the station stairs. "We regroup on the ground. We find a way out." She said it like a nurse calling a time of death, not loud because the loud thing had already happened. They moved as one organism made of 6 pieces that had agreed to pretend to be whole. Under the platform, the substructure creaked in careful, polite notes, like someone rearranging chairs after a party everyone left without saying goodbye. Lisa walked backward, filming the void where the catwalk had been, which is an impossible thing to film until it's not. At the bottom of the stairs, the midway had grown teeth. Not literal, never literal, but angles that wanted to bite. The clown shutter's paint had flaked another layer off its cheek, revealing a new vein of white that made the old grin wider. From behind that metal smile, something tapped a pattern. 2 slow, 3 fast, drumroll's idiot cousin. "Don't," John said, when Emily took a step toward the shutter. "Just don't." "Keys," David said abruptly. He pointed to a ring on a hook beside the operator's booth, as if keys were the kind of magic that worked here. When he lifted them, they spoke to one another in a dry jangle that carried too far, sounding like laughter's bones. He pocketed them anyway. Sarah did the count before anyone could ask. 5, she said, and the number felt like a lie that was trying to grow up into truth. A murmur as soft as moth wings chased the word along the pavement and tucked it under one of the game booths, where it rustled once and went still. They took the center lane of the midway, meaning the one that led straight back to the main gates in any park built by people. Their footsteps stitched a seam of sound that kept splitting as the asphalt gave way to gravel and then to cracked concrete. Lisa kept her camera low, now catching ankles and shadows. Later, the comments would fight about what they saw there. They reached the popcorn stand with its roof crumpled like a hat pressed wrong. Inside, a popcorn machine tried to start a cough or click a stubborn little word that wanted to be a purr and failed. The smell that came out was not popcorn. It was old sugar, and the idea of butter remembering it once existed. Mark, Emily said finally, letting the name cross her teeth. The Ferris wheel answered with a single slow tick, a sound like a clock deciding to add a second to a day. Lisa lifted the camera and caught the car that had moved, but in the footage, every car seemed to have shifted a different amount than in memory, and so none of it could be proved. "Listen," John said, and they all did. They listened the way animals do with the bones around their ears. From the far end of the park, where the merry-go-round stood in its bandstand like a prim ant, there came a tune that wasn't a tune pipes exhaling at different times, hooves that were wood-tapping a floor. That was wood too, a confused duet of clop and wheeze. "Don't," Sarah said again. But she was already turning toward it, because warning yourself is a way of walking in the direction you warned yourself against. A small string of bells laughed at their indecision, tink, 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 as if a child had shaken the idea of jewelry. The carousel called, but not to them. To someone else, or to everyone who had ever thought a circle could be a way out. They stopped as a unit at the edge of its light. There was no power, but light existed, a jealous amber that made everyone's skin look like strangers. Under the roof, the mirrors clicked once as they settled no wind. Just the building remembering to adjust its face. Horses stood in precise poses of mercy and chase. One had a mouth slightly open, painted teeth, tiny and deliberate. Lisa zoomed and saw that a crack ran from the corner of its lip to its eye, a fissure that made the expression complicated, as if it were about to confess. "Keep going," Sarah said, but they didn't. The organ sighed in the old carnival, Flat's cousin with a limp, and the melody stumbled forward, bumping into itself and apologizing with a puffing wheeze. Emily's throat tightened around the words she'd prepared about history and hauntings. "I read," she began. A child's giggle came from somewhere above one of the gilt medallions near the ceiling, landing on them like dust and then rolling off weightless and intentional. David checked the EMF, and because he needed the lie, said, "It's spiking." John, who hid fear in a pocket with his hands, pointed at the center column. Someone had tied ribbons there, curled and sun-bleached. Someone else had clipped photographs with clothespins to the ribbon tails. The wind inside, there is always wind inside, had gentled them into a carousel of faces. Some were smiling too hard. Some were not. As they watched the wooden floor, offered a single delicate creak directly beneath the horse with a cracked face like a knee giving it a polite curtsy. "Not now," Sarah said, as if scolding the park for wanting attention while they were grieving. Lisa lowered the camera. She shouldn't have. She should have kept filming everything and nothing. From the black pond behind them, a gulping sound rose, the wet mouth of water taking back something it had been lent. And then small ripples tattled against the stone lip with a chitter like teeth and cold. She turned, heartbreaking the choreography of her ribs. "We have to go," Emily said. Before the carousel answered without turning, letting the music swell a notch, not into joy, but into insistence, each pipe adding its own asthmatic complaint to a chorus that had learned itself in a sick room. The horse with the cracked mouth did not move. Its shadow did. Somewhere, a bell intended to mark tickets being sold kept tally ding, ding, ding at the rate of a tired cashier. Lisa Sarah said, "Left or right? Choose." Lisa chose left. The midway left took them by the Guess Your Weight booth and the stand that had once sold neon lemonade in cups shaped like light bulbs. Inside the weight booth, the old scale let its needle bounce, pat, pat, pat against the glass, as if trying to wake the person who had always known what you weighed before you stepped on. John kept his eyes on the ground. He did not see the clown. The clown saw him, or maybe the shutter with the clown on it shifted in such a way that the eyes found John by accident. A churr of gravel under his shoe was enough of a signal. The metal slats behind the paint trembled, a short, quick rattle like breath laughed through teeth. John looked up. "Don't," Sarah said for a third time. That wasn't a charm. A chorus of whispers unfurled along the booth roofs, sis wind doing tricks with vocabulary. And yet each hush seemed to put John's name in its mouth. He flinched and moved back into the herd. The herd moved forward. They were almost at the gates. Almost. C. David said, trying out optimism like a jacket that doesn't quite fit. Where the chain-link fits. Gave a tinny groan, the side of her throat deciding to close. And the gate they had used relatched itself with two firm clicks, like yes and yes. Sarah's jaw set. "There's another exit," she said, and we believed her because we needed to. Lisa kept filming. Her mic picked up the soft sock of sneakers and old dust, the hiss of her own sleeve when it brushed the strap, and below that the far carnival's breath, an organism sleeping with its eyes open and wheezing in its dreams. She did not say Mark's name again. She looked through the viewfinder as if the rectangular world could be the one that obeyed. Behind them, something small ran across the midway, either a raccoon or the memory of a child. Its claws made a brisk little tick-tick-tick, making the silence brighter by contrast, and then it was gone into the thoughts the park has about bushes. Lisa Emily said, because words bend toward those who can bear them. "Your battery half." Lisa said, "Half of half." They passed beneath the arch of the ticket booth, where once dates had been stamped and hands had been held a beat too long. From within the cash drawer, thunked open on its own rails, and then slid shut again with a thunk that answered itself. Sarah did not jump. She had recalibrated what counts as a jump. "Straight," she said. "Find the parking lot. Find the road." A murmur swam through the trees along the fence. Wind, yes, but instructive wind, a hush that sounded like a map being folded wrong and thrown away. The asphalt ahead of them buckled where tree roots had petitioned for change. The white paint of arrows had flaked into snow. They walked anyway. The park kept talking a little bell here, a hinge there, a penny dropping inside a prize bin and not being found. The Ferris wheel ticked one more time. The calliope exhaled a note that didn't know it was supposed to be cheerful and came out lonely. They did not look back, except Lisa did, and the camera recorded the midway as it had been a minute before, and as it was now, and as it had been in 1986. All at once the frames misregistered and overlapping. At the last turn before the parking lot, the path forked. Left was what the map by the gate would have called guest services. Now a building full of chairs arranged to look like a meeting that had ended itself. Right was the maintenance road. Right had a sign that said, "No admittance," in letters eaten at the edges by air. Left, Sarah said. Right, Lisa said, surprising herself. The road might reach the outer fence faster. The park, unhelpful, offered a creak from the left and a soft clack from the right of the two sounds weighing themselves like a scale pretending to be neutral. Sarah's eyes met Lisa's, and for a second, all the accidents that had never killed them decided not to start tonight. Right, Sarah said. Fast, they ran. Gravel popped beneath their shoes like tiny knuckles. The maintenance road's gradient dropped away, and the trees leaned in with the confidence of things that had always been tall. Somewhere ahead, a generator yawned awake without fuel, the long, low of pretend electricity, and then thought better of its performance, and quieted as if embarrassed to have tried. They reached a chain-link gate with a padlock the size of a fist. David showed the keys like a magic trick he had been practicing all along. They chittered encouragement at one another, chunk, while he sorted teeth and mouths. The third key went halfway and stopped. The fifth slid in with a promise and jammed. "Come on," Emily said, not to David. The padlock answered with an old man's cough and with a bright little click like a bird making up its mind. The shackles sprang. The gate shrugged open 4 inches and stuck. They pulled. Metal rasped against metal, long, rusty an argument that had lasted decades and learned all the worst words. The gap widened enough for bodies to pass. Sarah pointed. "Go." Lisa slid through and turned to help Emily. In the somewhere everywhere behind them, the carousel found a stronger way and let the tune ring clearer pipes rounding into shape. A laugh, human-sized and exhausted, braided through the notes as if someone were practicing joy from memory. Lisa's camera caught the Ferris wheel in the corner of the frame. One car had moved again. They were through, except John. He had paused hand to chest at the squeak of that laugh. The squeak repeated shorter this time, like a hand puppet asking for attention with rubber voice. John, Sarah said, "Now." He looked back at the shuttered clown. Its smile didn't move. Its eyes didn't either, except that they had. He stepped into the gap. The gate settled back into place with a satisfied clunk, as if the park had been patient and now it wasn't. On the other side, the parking lot was a plain of quiet cars not there. Far-off highway noise unrolled like a river behind a hill, a continuous shh that made the silence of the lot feel staged. The air out here smelled like outside air, which is to say, it smelled like things that aren't you. No one spoke for a few seconds that were 4 years long. Behind them through the mesh came the faintest prattle of tickets being torn. Rip performed for an audience consisting of no one and them. Sarah found her voice in the place where leaders keep spare faces. "We're going to the road. We're getting help." Where Lisa lowered the camera as if lowering a flag. "We're bringing him out," she said. "We're not leaving him in there." The comet patient as a boa waited somewhere under the hot skeleton of the night. From deep inside the park, a whistle blew one sharp note of beginning that arrived too late. And then the calliope giggled, hiccuped, and went silent as if caught in the act. The Ferris wheel did not stop. It had never started. It would start later, or earlier, or now. They moved toward the road. Their shoes made a friction song with the lot's grit, a static rustle, and every so often, a tiny stone clicked away to write its own small story in a corner. Lisa filmed the ground. It felt safer than filming the sky. At the curb, Lisa stopped. She turned. Through the fence, she could frame the lift hill in the gap where a boy had become an after. In her headphones, a faint recording hissed, "Keep hands and feet inside the car at all times, then lower, as if a mouth were right at her ear, or we'll help you." She took the headphones off and shook them like something that had gotten inside. Nothing fell out. Lisa, Sarah said not asking, telling. Lisa nodded. They crossed to the shoulder. The road outside Pleasure Park wore its own history in oil and skid marks, and the casual litter of lives that had not ended tonight. A far semi-downshifted and made the air vibrate with a chest-deep growl, a comforting, ordinary sound, then Dopplered past into unremarkable distance. The ordinary sound hurt worse than anything. Emily leaned into Lisa, and Lisa let her. David checked his phone and saw no bars, then saw two, then watched them leak away like heat. In the fence behind them, a single link pinged the bright surprise note of something being plucked and then gave up the idea of music. John rubbed his face harder than faces prefer and wiped his hand on his jeans as if fear were a thing that could smear. "We'll call from the gas station," Sarah said. "We'll send whoever will come." "We'll..." She didn't finish because the park finished for her. From the carousel, a roar of pipes pretending to be brass, a whir that wasn't gears, a flurry of tapped hooves music assembling itself like a crowd arriving at once, and threaded through a clown's laugh, echoing as if from the inside of a tin can carried down a hallway. The laugh wasn't for them, and it was entirely for them. Lisa didn't cry yet. She raised the camera again and let the lens look back through the fence. Somewhere far, the Ferris wheel whispered its single syllable of movement tick, and a gull who had no business being out at night pealed a quick complaint and was gone. "Let's go," Sarah said. And they did 5 shadows, stretched long by a moon that had agreed to pretend it was a spotlight. Behind them, the park hummed to itself, a low-sated lullaby-shaped drone, as if tucking the night in and smoothing its own sheets. The Ferris wheel groaned as if recognizing new passengers. The 6 of them had already crossed into something irreversible, though none admitted it. The lap bars had locked them down like the hands of something unseen. The chain clattered, teeth grinding against teeth, chank, 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 dragging the cars upward into the night. Lisa's camera light cut thin ribbons across their faces. Her hands shook, but she kept filming, determined. "It's moving on its own," she whispered. Somewhere below, a warped carnival march, swelled trumpets, wheezing drums, stumbling in a crooked rhythm. Emily covered her ears. "There's no speakers working here." "There are now," John muttered, but his usual sarcasm sounded brittle like chalk breaking. As the cars rose higher, the park unfolded beneath them. From above, the midway wasn't dead at all. It shimmered with faint lights, booths flickering alive like fireflies. Shadowy shapes drifted between them, as if customers had returned for one more night of fun. Children's laughter rippled faintly from the ground, too thin, too distorted, like a tape left out in the rain. Sarah clenched the bar. "Don't look down." Mark, reckless, leaned out. His grin collapsed when he saw it on the coaster's curve, exactly where the accident had happened decades ago. Phantom cars raced along the broken track. For an instant, each car carried passengers frozen in the moment of impact. Mouths open, arms twisted. Their screams rose, overlapping a chorus that had never ended. It spiraled upward and met the group like a wind. David's EMF reader spiked its plastic body, trembling. "They're still here," he said, almost reverent. 23. Still riding. The Ferris wheel halted at the very top 6 cars, swaying like pendulums. The city lights of Ohio blinked faint in the distance. But inside the park, light had its own rules. Midway bulbs burned in crooked constellations, and the clown mural on the shutter seemed to pulse, grin widening with every second. From behind them, hidden somewhere within the wheel skeleton, came a hollow giggle low at first, then climbing in pitch until it cracked like glass. Emily pressed her palms over her face. "That's not mechanical." The wheel shuddered, and David's seat jolted. His harness dug into his ribs. He gasped. Something pulled me. Metal screeched long and angry, as if the bolts themselves were twisted. Lisa swung her camera, catching the blur of movement. One of the ghostly passengers from the Phantom coaster had climbed into their reality. A boy in a shredded varsity jacket, skin bloodless, eyes hollow. He reached toward David. The boy's voice was a smear of static syllables dragged across broken speakers. No, no, no. David cried, kicking. His shoe connected with nothing, yet the boy recoiled. For a breath, he dissolved into sparks of ash. But the wheel wasn't finished. It lurched forward again, dropping them half a rotation. Mark's knuckles turned white on the bar. This is insane. The carnival music below warped faster, spiraling into a manic carousel tune, calliope pipes shrieking like boiling tea kettles. Sarah shook her head. They're replaying it. The whole accident. We're the new show. Lisa focused the lens on Mark. She wanted proof, even as her own heart scrambled in her chest. Behind him, in the shadows of the next car, something dangled. Rope. A figure swayed. A young man, face split by impact, skull-caved lips, moving in silent chant. The rope creaked, each sway louder than the wind, as if the noose itself wanted to be heard. John tried to crack a joke, but only a whimper came out. His breath fogged, though the night was warm. Then the wheel dropped them again, this time violently. Lisa's camera slipped, but she caught it against her chest. The ride stopped midway, half the group staring down at the pond that reflected no stars. Its surface writhed, as if something beneath pushed against it. The water gurgled and hissed, bubbles bursting like bones snapping under pressure. Sarah whispered, "That's where they drowned. Some of them thrown from the coaster." Emily screamed when she noticed shapes rising, pale arms breaking the surface, fingers clawing upward, not to escape, but to drag. The pond moaned, a cavernous liquid groan that rolled across the midway like thunder. David clutched at the harness. "We can't get out," Mark snarled, yanking at the bar. "Yes, we can, watch me." He forced his weight forward. For a miraculous second, the latch gave. Mark laughed triumphantly. Then the wheel jolted. A bolt snapped, a gunshot crack echoing across the park. The bar sprang open. Mark pitched forward. His body cartwheeled into the night air, and for a moment, he was weightless, a dark figure against the moon. The sound of rushing wind consumed everything, whoosh followed by a wet, bone-tearing crunch as the roller coaster track below caught him like a blade. Lisa screamed. Her camera caught the blur, then static. The others froze in horror. 5 left. The wheel groaned again, pleased with its offering. Somewhere deep in the midway, the clown's laugh boomed. Ha 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 ha. Slow, deliberate, like a judge stamping sentences. Lisa couldn't breathe. Sarah grabbed her hand. "Don't look anymore. Just don't." But the park made sure they would. The Ferris wheel began another climb. The Ferris wheel carried them down again, the empty space where Mark had sat now, gaping like a missing tooth. Lisa couldn't stop shaking. Her camera trembled in her grip, recording everything, though her heart begged her to shut it off. The chains rattled with cruel rhythm, clank, 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 like laughter in metal. The wheel stopped suddenly. Their car hung across from the Midway's shuttered funhouse, its clown mural lit up by a sickly orange glow that hadn't been there before. From behind the painted smile came a dragging scrape like nails over sheet metal. Then slow and deliberate, a laugh uncoiled, ha, 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 each syllable soaked in static deep enough to make their ribs vibrate. John whispered, "It's calling us." The Ferris wheel lurched, swinging their car forward until it aligned perfectly with the funhouse balcony. The safety bars snapped open by themselves. The squeal of steam became triumphant, as though the ride enjoyed letting them go. "No," Emily said, clutching the bar, but unseen force yanked. She screamed as her body lifted, thrown across the gap onto the balcony. The others had no choice but to follow, dragged like puppets. Inside the funhouse smelled of mold and rusted grease paint. Mirrors lined the hall, warped and cracked. Each reflection twisted their bodies into new shapes, elongated limbs, eyeless faces, grins cut too wide. Every mirror whispered faintly, a chorus of voices murmuring over one another like a crowd at a trial. Sarah squeezed Lisa's hand. "Don't look. I can't stop looking," Lisa said, her lens feeding the nightmare back to them. At the center of the room waited a figure in patchwork costume. The clown. His painted face was fissured like porcelain colors peeling away to gray flesh beneath. He lifted his chin, and where his mouth should have been curved, paint, it was instead a jagged split, stretching ear to ear. He exhaled a laugh that dragged across the walls like nails in a chalkboard factory. David raised the EMF reader like a crucifix. The device shrieked in protest. The high-pitched screech stabbed their ears like glass cracking under pressure. The clown pointed one by one at each of them, a silent judgment. Then he spread his arms. The mirrors trembled and scenes appeared. They saw Mark's death replayed again and again, his body torn by the coaster like a broken doll. Emily sobbed. "Stop it, please," the clown stepped closer. With each footfall, the funhouse floor thudded like a drum. He reached for Emily. Her scream cut through the mirrors, a piercing note that bounced endlessly, fracturing into echoes. "Emily, illy, illy, illy." Glass burst. Shards flew. One shard embedded into Emily's shoulder. She staggered backward against the carousel horse display. The horse's painted eyes rolled open, glowing faint yellow. Their wooden jaws snapped shut with sharp cracks, clack, clack, clack like gunfire. Before Sarah could reach her, one horse lunged. Its teeth clamped around Emily's neck. Blood sprayed against the funhouse mirrors. The crunch of cartilage and the horse's splintering bite drowned the room. Emily's body dropped limp, dragged into darkness between the wooden figures. Lisa's scream shattered her throat. "Oh my God, no." The clown tilted his head satisfied. 4 left now. John, desperate, swung a rusted chair at the figure. The blow passed through, striking only air. The clown's reflection in the mirror, however, staggered. The mirror groaned like someone crying from underwater. David caught it. "It's the reflections. Hit them, not him." They smashed mirrors. Each shatter sent the clown stumbling. But shards cut their skin. Blood spattered across the floor. Every crash of glass rang out like a bell toll, bong deep metallic, echoing through the park. For a moment, the clown dissolved into smoke. But then, a new laugh swelled from the broken shards around their feet. The fragments all whispered, laughed together, 1,000 little throats, giggling in high static harmony. John backed against the wall, shaking. "We can't win. We can't." The clown surged from the shards, his face closer now, jaw splitting wider. He seized John by the head. The wet rip of skin tearing filled the funhouse, the sound too sharp to be real. The clown peeled John's face away like a mask, tossing the screaming body aside. John gurgled once, then fell still, faceless. Lisa dropped the camera, her world spinning. Sarah pulled her close. Only 3 left now. David screamed, swinging wildly, shattering mirror after mirror. But the clown's laugh remained. The sound had no body now. It was everywhere. Laughter echoed from the ceiling, the floor, even the glass dust under their shoes. Ha, 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 circling them like a pack of wolves. Lisa, Sarah whispered, "We have to run." They stumbled deeper into the funhouse, away from John's ruin. Doors appeared where none had been, leading into darker tunnels lined with funhouse murals of smiling faces. The painted mouths dripped fresh red. From behind the carousel, horses whinnied their cries, shrill and metallic, like rusty hinges screaming. David's voice shook. "We can't stop here. If we stop, he'll..." The clown's laugh interrupted him again, louder, booming as though amplified by the entire park's speaker system. Ha 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 ha, rolling across every midway, every broken ride. The trial was over. The sentence was death. The funhouse stretched into endless corridors. Lisa, Sarah, and David stumbled forward, the air thick with the smell of rust, grease, and blood. Behind them, the clown's laugh rolled like thunder. The echoes ricocheted off every wall, ha 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 ha, until it was impossible to tell where he was. Lisa's camera flickered, battery nearly gone. Each flash of red light painted her friends in grotesque silhouettes, faces, pale eyes, wide sweat gleaming. They burst through a warped door and into the park again. The midway was alive now, rides spinning, booths, glowing shadowy crowds moving without faces. The warped carnival music blared louder, calliope shrieking, drums pounding with a rhythmic violence. Sarah grabbed Lisa's hand. "Don't stop, just run." But David staggered, clutching his ribs. "Something's wrong," he gasped. His shirt tore open to reveal bruises spreading across his chest like handprints. From above, the Ferris wheel groaned, "Eee!" its rusted voice shaking the ground. Lisa looked up. One of the cars was no longer empty. A figure hung upside down, suspended by invisible ropes. Its skull bulged, then cracked open like an egg. David screamed as if answering. Invisible cords snared his ankles and wrists, yanking him upward. The sound of tightening ropes snapped in the air, twang, twang like guitar strings pulled too far. He dangled above them, thrashing eyes wild. "Help me, please." But the ropes pulled tighter. The wet pop of bone dislocating echoed, followed by the sickening crack as his skull slammed against the wheel's iron. Blood rained down, spattering Sarah and Lisa. His body convulsed once more before hanging limp. Lisa's scream cut through the midway. Only two left. Sarah dragged her away, running toward the black pond. But the water wasn't still. The surface writhed with pale hands, reaching, clawing, inviting. The pond hissed and bubbled, like acid eating through metal. Lisa pulled back, not that way. But Sarah was already at the edge, panting. Maybe we swim across. Maybe a hand shot from the water, seizing her ankle. She shrieked, clawing at the ground. Lisa grabbed her wrists, pulling. The water roared, a cavernous gurgle with its swirling scream. Dozens of pale arms rose, dragging Sarah down. She disappeared beneath the black surface. Lisa's hands clutched at nothing. The last sound Sarah made was a muffled cry, strangled into silence by the pond's boiling hiss. Lisa collapsed to her knees, sobbing. The midway flickered around her lights, strobing shadows twisting into skeletal forms. She was the last one. The clown's laugh erupted across every speaker, booming ha 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 ha, rolling through the park like a storm. Lisa staggered toward the exit. Her camera slipped clattering to the ground, but she snatched it back. "I have to show this," she whispered. "I have to prove it's real." The gate appeared ahead, glowing faintly. Hope surged in her chest. She stumbled faster, but the midway warped, stretching longer, further. Behind her, the squeal of roller coaster wheels roared to life, screamed like a predator charging. She turned. The phantom coaster thundered toward her cars, packed with screaming, faceless riders. The track materialized under it, splitting the ground open. Lisa screamed and bolted. The coaster roared past, but one ghostly passenger reached for her, brushing her shoulder with icy fingers. The sound of fingernails scraping bone rang in her ears. Scritch! She collapsed at the gates. Her camera rolled across the dirt, lens cracked, still recording. The park fell silent. She lifted her head. The clown stood before her, looming grin, wider than ever. His cracked face dripped with darkness. He whispered a laugh, low and intimate, that curled inside her skull like worms. Lisa shrieked until her voice tore. The screen went black. When the feed returned, Lisa sat alone at the midway. Her eyes were wide empty. She rocked back and forth, giggling. Her giggle was thin and broken, a child's laugh recorded too many times until it warped. The camera tilted on its side lens, staring up at the sky. Above, the Ferris wheel still turned slow and steady. Its rusted joints groaned while faint carnival music drifted from nowhere, carrying the sound of children's laughter across the dark Ohio night.